Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 27th episode of the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, a podcast all about the subject of antinatalism created by antinatalists. My name is Amanda Oldfan Sukenick, also known as Forever Wolf Films on YouTube.
And I'm Mark J. Maharaj, also known as Question Mark on YouTube.
And today, we're speaking with fellow founder of Antinatalism International and the co-author of An Antinatalist Handbook, Responses to Common Natalist Excuses, Lawrence Anton.
Sorry. Welcome to Exploring Antinatalism, Lawrence.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lawrence, in your own words, who is Lawrence Anton?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm not really anyone. I don't really have any sort of like
You're quite humble.
credentials. But I'm born and raised in London in the UK. Lived abroad for 1 year in Sweden. I've done sort of like several years of animal rights activism, more recently anti-natalism as well. Apart from that, I haven't I'm not like an academic or anything like that. So yeah.
Well, this question actually wasn't on the list, but I'd meant to add it. What did you study in school?
Oh, environmental science. But but that's quite like I don't know if you wanted to get into it, but that's quite like interesting. I have like a love-hate relationship with that.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so when I did the degree, I was like, my understanding of ethics was severely malnourished. So like I went into doing environmental science, like really the only reason I went to university was because everyone else does. And then I just had to pick a subject, and I was kind of interested in environmental stuff. And so I ended up doing it. But I was one of these people that I just sort of like went to the lecture room, learned it. I was like, okay, I need to know that for the exam. And then I would like learn it for the exam. But I never took what I was learning and like applied it to like real life, if you get what I mean. Like we would learn all this stuff, but I wouldn't really understand like, oh, that actually has an impact in reality. So for example, in the degree, we never really ever learn about, for example, animal agriculture, as for obvious reasons I've become well acquainted with over the past couple of years. We just never really learned about the impact. It was mentioned once in one lecture over the 4 years I was doing my degree. And my course was maybe like 100 people, and I knew one person that ate a plant-based diet for environmental reasons. So that just shows you like how like disconnected even environmental science students are from just like applying the subject that they're learning to real life and how it actually has an impact. So anyway, there's that. And then there's a whole animal rights thing. Like I went to the University of East Anglia, which is probably one of the most respected environmental schools, at least in the UK. I think it's quite well respected internationally as well. And ethics just doesn't get a look in when it comes to talking about environmental sciences. Like we talk about, humans and our relationship with nature, our impact on nature, things like rewilding. And never once are the non-human animals in those environments actually discussed. We just talk about them from like a species level, or we just talk about nature as this sort of like amorphous, thing. And we never actually talk about like the actual like beings within it that obviously have interest in all this stuff. And it just never comes up. So I would really like to go back and try and start up a conversation about that. I was actually invited back to do a talk there because before coronavirus, and maybe we'll get onto this later, but I did go around and do some talks at universities. I guess through like just mutual friends or contacts, someone then reached out to me from my old university and said, we're having a green film festival, or like an environmental film festival. Can you come and speak at it? And I was like, yeah. And I mean, it didn't happen because Corona happened, so it got cancelled. But if I get, if it gets put back together again and I get invited again, I would definitely go back and ask those questions, because it's just like, it's not discussed at all. It's never even taken into account from what I saw, and I spent 4 years studying it. But
Yeah, I mean, that's
Sorry, that was a bit of a
unfortunate.
lot.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, it's honestly, I think you would have a lot to add to that field coming from where you're coming from now, because it's population on top of that, antinatalism on top of that, I think could be an important part to a piece to add to that conversation as well. And I definitely want to talk to you more about the public speaking that you have already done and wish to do in the future. We'll get to that in a bit. Talk about in your blog post that you wrote on the ANI website, which I highly recommend everybody go check out. You have this very interesting story about like when you first heard the term antinatalism. Can you tell that story again about the first time you heard this word, the impact it had?
Yeah. Well, so a bit of tiny bit of backstory. Was that, as I said before, I lived in Sweden for a year. I usually refer to it as living in Sweden. I was doing an exchange program, but I didn't study, so I was basically just living there and occasionally went to lectures. But so basically I was in Sweden at this point. And also another tiny bit of background is that up until this point, I had always wanted kids. Like I often said to people, I don't know, like you get old people asking you questions like, what do you want to do in life? Or, what are your goals?
Yeah.
I would always say I just want kids. I don't really mind if I didn't have that amazing a job, or, I didn't, write great works of literature or whatever. Like if I had a kid, I would be pretty happy. So that was like the sort of mindset I had. And then basically I was doing, I think it was just, again, because it was a few years ago, the details are kind of hazy, but I think it was before I was going back for Christmas. So I would have been going back to the UK just to spend the Christmas break. And it was like one of the last activism events I was doing. It was a Cube of Truth in the center of Stockholm. And we'd finished and we were heading towards, we were going to a supermarket to get some food. And on the walk towards the supermarket, I was just, I was walking with the organizer of the demonstration, and I was just talking to him. And then I overheard this guy was speaking to this girl, and the girl said something. And he said in reply, he sort of laughed and said, yeah, because, having kids is bad or immoral or something like that. I can't remember the exact words. And I overheard this, and from the mindset I was coming from, I turned to the organizer who I was already standing next to, and I was like, what is that guy on about? Like, why would he say that? I've never heard anyone say something like that before. And the organizer said like, oh yeah, like he's just an antinatalist. Like, don't take him seriously. And which may sound familiar to anyone listening. But anyway, so I was sort of like, I don't know, when people, it's called like the Streisand effect, right? But I have this very strongly. Like, if people try to shut down conversation on something, it makes me want to have the conversation more, if you get what I mean. And this is like a common thing with humans, like just censorship always backfires. But anyway, so because of that, I wanted to kind of know, why would he say that, and what is this antinatalism thing? But the guy, basically, I didn't get a chance to talk to the guy because I think he left for something or some reason. Again, my memory is kind of hazy on the details. But anyway, then I went back to the UK and I was doing another Cube of Truth in Leicester Square. And afterwards, we went to this restaurant just off Leicester Square, just to socialize after the event. And I was talking to one of the organizers, Brad, and this other activist who was sort of like a proper old school activist. He's dead now. He died of cancer recently. But basically, I was talking to them, and it just came up in conversation, like the ethics of procreation. I can't remember how. And I said to them, like, yeah, I just had this thing like a couple of weeks ago. I was in Stockholm, and that conversation like came up, and it just got completely shut down. And they were both like, yeah, that happens all the time. And I was like fascinated. I was like, why do people not want to talk about that? And they were just like, animal rights activists, they're just in denial and stuff like this. Well, people generally as well. But I was just really like perplexed, because I was like, all of these people here, animal rights activists, they're already sort of on the outside of society, trying to get other people who are closed-minded to try and realize something, and yet they're closed-minded to this. So I was just really confused, and I was just asking them loads of questions, and then basically by the end of that conversation, I was just like, yeah, that's me. I got no arguments. I mean, I'm being a bit sort of like shorthanded about it. I went home that night and listened to some podcasts with like David Benatar and I think Sam Harris. Is that the one? They did one. And I was just thinking, like, I just listened to a couple of these videos and podcasts, and I was just like, every single argument that someone uses against this just sounds like so dumb. And I was just like, none of them seem to stand up, and I couldn't think of any good arguments against it. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to, change my mind. And like, honestly, it was like blowing my mind. You know, when you like realize a whole new thing and you're like, I've never thought about this before. It just like completely blew my mind. And also, it was coming from two people that I respected a lot. So I was like, these two guys are obviously smart. Like, they're not just going to be chatting shit to me. Like, they've obviously thought about this. So I was taking it seriously. But the conversation, I mean, the first thing we started on was just that animal rights activists just didn't want to talk about it. It was just something that wasn't spoken about. It got shut down a lot. And then it moved on to like, okay, I appreciate that it gets shut down a lot, but actually, like, why would someone believe this? Like, is it actually a reasonable thing to think, or is it rational, etc.? And like, we covered the general bases that anyone would generally cover in a talk about procreation. I asked all of the sort of obvious and stupid questions, and stuff like this. Again, like the classic, I would ask stuff like, yeah, but what if they have a good life, etc., etc. And like, every time I said stuff, they would just knock it out the park. So yeah, and then I eventually, and then it moved on to like, I don't understand why no one is talking about like this. This is like such a big topic about something that happens everywhere. Like, literally, procreation, like, by definition, has always been happening. Because like, so yeah.
Was there any other influences when you were looking it up online?
I think it was just Benatar, because like I say before, I'd never really heard this concept, and so I didn't know any of the proponents of it. I didn't know any of the names. And when I finished the conversation with the two guys in the restaurant, I asked them, like, oh, if I go home tonight and you would recommend me watching something, what would you recommend? And they recommend reading Better Never to Have Been by David Benatar. And I don't read, so I was like, that's not going to happen. But then they said, like, oh, if you're not going to read, then check out this podcast. And I'm pretty sure the first one I listened to was the Sam Harris, David Benatar one. But basically, the only reason that I just listened to David Benatar that night is because he was the only name I really knew. And because they were kind of like available, I was just like, yeah, I'll just watch all his stuff rather than doing general searches online. So, I mean, obviously now I'm aware of more people that talk about it and stuff, and more of the figures. But yeah, initially it was just Benatar that I was listening to.
So if someone's to approach you now that you have all this research and you have your book as well, how would you summarize why you are an antinatalist?
Usually, the place that I usually come from when I'm talking to people is, first of all, I always try and get them to recognize initially that it is an act that you have to justify. Because most people just think it's something like, oh, maybe someone has kids, maybe someone doesn't, like, who cares? It's a personal choice. So the first thing I always do is try and get people to recognize that it is actually something you have to justify. Like, it's literally the biggest thing you can do to someone, create them. So like, obviously it's a no-brainer. It's something that you have to justify because you're impacting someone else like massively and directly, and explicitly as well. Like people know, like if people, obviously there are people that will not have kids by accident, but become pregnant by accident, and then maybe there are other complications, just leads to them having a kid. But if someone is planning to have a child, they're explicitly, they know that is what they're doing, and so yeah, I try and get them to recognize that they need a justification for it first, and then I sort of ask them, well, okay, now that we know that it's something you need to justify, let's think about all the justifications that people use and actually what would be the general case against it. So with going through general sort of reasons people give for procreating, like I won't go through them now. You can look at the booklet that Lathan and I put together, but it addresses a lot of them there. But when I want to put a general case against it to someone, usually the angle that I come from is, in essence, is just like, what gives you the right to create someone else? Like, they didn't ask you. It's not like they're begging to come into existence. Why do you think that you have the place just to create someone else when they haven't asked for it? And essentially, I guess it's a form of the consent argument, which I mean, a lot of people have told me that they find the consent argument not very persuasive, but I find it super persuasive. Like, I feel like if someone doesn't exist, you can't get consent from them. And if you're going to do something that significantly, directly, explicitly impacts their well-being, which this will do, you need to get that. And you don't have to do the action. It's completely unnecessary. You could just leave them in non-existence. Then you have to get their consent if you want to do that to them, and you can't. And what do you do if you can't get someone's consent for something? Just don't do it. Like, it's the classic sort of someone passes out at a party, you can't get consent from them, no brainer, don't do anything. So maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but it's sort of in a similar vein. So that's usually how I approach it with people.
Yeah, very good. I have always felt that the consent argument is very strong and very necessary. And yeah, I mean, if you're in a situation where you can't get consent, then you have to choose the fail safe. You have to just not take the chance.
Yeah.
So that just seems but obviously I know that's a very it's a bit of a controversial argument in our community, because
really, you think so? Like
oh yeah, definitely.
If you were to do like a poll, what would you think the percentage is? Because I keep running into people that defend the consent argument, and I actually feel like a minority for defending the axiological asymmetry argument. So I'm curious what you guys think.
It would be interesting actually to run a poll like that and see what angles people come from.
There was a poll a few years ago. I think some of it is in one of the Antinatalism magazines. But I don't think that and I could be 100% wrong, but I don't think that it covered individual arguments and like which ones, people gravitate towards more. That is something I'd like to see ANI do eventually, is like run polls and run gather statistics of that sort. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I don't know if this is like spoilers or whatever, but when we were talking, you can edit this out if it is, but when we were talking about how in the future we would want to do sort of like a global census,
yes,
which as a term maybe sounds a bit 1984-y, but you know what I mean, like basically just doing sort of like a scattergun, get a bit of information, see where people are coming from. Yes. That would be a good thing to include.
Yeah, I think so. I think desperately needed at this point. There's so many things like that within the community where it's just like, who reads the books? Who watches the videos? Where do people get their information from? What arguments are stronger? What do they use when they talk to people? It's all a bit unknown at this point. So yeah, I agree with you. Who or what would you say has had the most influence on your worldviews in general?
You mean like do you mean like experiences I've had, or like public figures?
It can be anything really. I think Mark wrote this question. So Mark, would you like to clarify at all?
It was more both of your vegan worldview and your antinatalist worldview. what was the accumulation of influences that shaped your worldview in general?
Well, I would say this is kind of like an odd answer, but if I was going to say if there was anyone in existence that has influenced me or caused me to think the way I do more than anything, I would actually say, and this is a really weird answer, but there was a dog I used to live with, and I would say it was that dog, which maybe we'll get onto this in like a later section.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, this sounds super weird, but I basically had an experience with a dog, not like how people are thinking. But basically, I had an experience with a dog. And like literally, I would say like if I hadn't had that experience, I would be like radically different person than I am now. I would just be. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to explain that right now?
You'd be pregnant and eating meat right now.
Exactly.
That is an amazing story. Yeah, if you want to tell that now, I mean, that'd be great. It was well. Let me just sort of set up the question. I mean, you about that dog. It is an amazing story, and you did write about this in some detail again in the blog post that you've done on the A&I website. But this experience with this dog, yeah, really had this amazing impact on you and the course of your destiny with veganism and all and animal rights. So yeah, well, I'd love to hear that story. Please.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So. As I said before, I was on an exchange in Uppsala, which is a small city in Sweden, and I was living on. There's like an infamous estate which is mostly inhabited by students, but there are some, for want of a better phrase, normal people living there. But basically, I moved onto this estate, and it's sort of like 12 people to a corridor, you know, that sort of setup. But the people who run it, or the company that run it, they are quite hands off. As long as you pay your rent, by and large, they don't really bother you. And so even though there was what would you call it, like a rule saying no pets allowed, the corridor that I moved into, when I first got there, I found out that there was a dog living there as well with one of my flatmates. She was Swedish, and so her dog was living with her. And I was actually like very hesitant to interact with this dog at the start because I'm actually allergic to dog hair or fur or whatever it is. So when I was a kid, we never had any animals in the house. And when I went round because I was like raised in a city, so the only time you really interacted with animals was when you went around someone's house and they had a pet. But I would always stay away because I was also scared of dogs as well. But I was allergic to their hair and stuff, so I'd always stay away. But anyway, so I get to the apartment, find out there's a dog living there, and initially I was kind of like, oh damn it, this is going to be like a year of runny noses. And like after some time, I kind of grew fond of the dog because just the way that our timetables worked out. When my Swedish flatmate was away at lectures, I was often at home, so I would look after the dog. And I also found this carpet as well that I pulled into my room and used, and the dog just took a liking to it. And the dog is called Ema as well, so I'll just say Ema from now on. Anyway, so I ended up spending quite a bit of time with Ema, not really because I wanted to, although obviously I love him now, but initially I was kind of like a bit resistant. But anyway, I began sort of forming this relationship with with Ema, and began to actually like kind of like him. Like I was like, yeah, dogs are kind of fun. And also, you know, as you get to know, well, not just the dog, but any animal, you kind of realize their personality and stuff like this. You get less of a what do you call it? Descartian view. Was it Descartes who had that view of animals where they're just sort of like biological machines? They just act on instinct. Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I feel like from a distance, people have a very sort of like Cartesian or whatever you call it view, which I did as well. But anyway, so I ended up sort of getting to know this dog more. And there was one time where I was in the kitchen, and I was cooking meatballs, which were obviously made of pigs. And, well, these ones were anyway. And it was the first time that I'd been in the kitchen cooking, and Ema had come in, and he basically just came in, and I sort of bent down to, scratch the back of his ear or whatever. And then I came back up and I looked at the meatballs, and I was just like, oh, fuck. I don't know what it was, just something clicked in my head, and I was just like, fuck, those are animals as well. I've literally no idea why it happened then, but maybe the sort of, I don't know, stars aligned, as it were, or whatever. And it just sort of clicked in my head. I was like, oh, shit. Like, these animals have literally just been killed, and this dog here that I've just formed a relationship with, I'm actually getting on really well with. Like, I would never want him to be hurt or anything like that. So I kind of I turned the meatballs off, obviously, and then I sat on the kitchen floor for a bit, and I was just like, all these things going through my head, and I was like, what is going on? And then I threw the meatballs away, moved all the stuff that had animal products in from my shelf in the fridge to someone else's shelf, and went down to the local supermarket and just bought like a fully plant-based shop. And like someone listening might think like, oh, okay, well, why did you do a fully plant-based shop and not a vegetarian shop, like with milk or eggs in and stuff? Because it's not as obvious. Like, I was just cooking meatballs. I think the reason was because the year before I was living with a friend who, she was actually the person I was talking about on my environmental course. Maybe there was a second person who ate a plant-based diet for environmental reasons. She ate a fully plant-based diet, and so I was kind of used to seeing her buy, just like a wide selection of stuff. And I didn't really know, I don't know, maybe it just slotted into my mind that was the sort of thing to do, even though she never talked about animal ethics or anything. It was purely environmental. But I went down to the shop, bought a sort of fully plant-based shop, came back, and then I was supposed to be writing an essay that night, but that didn't happen. I just spent the whole evening watching documentaries and talks and stuff. So I watched like Gary Yourofsky's speech, Earthlings, the documentary. I never know how you say it, 101 Reasons to Go Vegan, or 101 or whatever. But I watched those three things first, because they just sort of came up on, suggested. And my mind was just like blown. I was like, what the fuck is going on? But I watched those three things. And again, it was sort of a similar case with antinatalism. Like, everything they were saying was making sense, and anything that came up in my mind where I was like, oh, could this be a counter argument, just got like knocked out the park 5 minutes later by something else they said. I still think personally that one of the best animal rights messages is the first like 5-10 minutes of Earthlings, where there's not like, I don't think there's any graphic footage. It's just Joaquin Phoenix, if that is how you say his name, just sort of like laying out a case and talking about the similarities between different forms of discrimination. And basically when I heard that, I was just like, that makes so much sense. And then I've never eaten animal products ever since. I got rid of my, I donated my belt to someone else. I had like a silk dressing gown that I gave away, my wallet as well. I had like a down jacket. I had like so many things that I just sort of like replaced. And then the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, it's like an amazing epiphany moment that like changed your entire life, which is with the meatballs and the dog. I just think it's an amazing story. So you literally went vegan from that moment on.
Yeah. But like it seemed like from 1 second to the next. Yeah. And also the reason I say that dog has had the most influence on my life, even though it may sound kind of weird, and I don't know if it's maybe like cringy in a way, but it's because that then led on to me. Well, it just changed my whole perspective, because as soon as I learned about what was happening to animals, I then sort of, before that, I was just very much the sort of person of like, just keep my head down, do what I need to do to make my life okay, you know, get a good job, get a family, house, etc., make sure I've got a cushy life, and don't really think about what else is going on around me. And just that realization, which, I mean, maybe I sound like I've a bit of a cunt before, I don't know, but
No.
basically that experience then just sort of like opened it all up, and I was like, okay, there are actually things going on that I need to consider and think about how I contribute to or relate to them. And then that made me a lot more open-minded to like challenging existing beliefs, which made it a lot easier for me to then go into stuff about procreation and stuff like that. So that's why I would say it's the dog. I mean, the dog didn't do anything. All he did was walk into the kitchen, but yeah, it had like a big impact.
Yeah, I'm curious about, so how long have you been involved in animal rights activism?
Probably just over 3 years.
3 years. And in the 3 years, you've probably noticed there's some division within the community, right? About like the approaches that they use. Say, you're probably familiar with the abolitionist approach with Gary Francione and Peter Singer's utilitarian approach and the reducitarian contingent. And I'm just curious, what type of approach do you take, and what kind of ethical framework do you work with? Is it a more rights-based approach, like say Tom Reagan, or I guess Gary Yourofsky would be that kind of, and Francione, or a more utilitarian approach, or maybe a virtue ethics approach? I'm just curious what kind of positions do you hold on that?
I would say the way I think about, at least when it comes to animal rights, I definitely sit more within the rights-based camp. And I mean, maybe I can provide a bit more of a justification for that than this, but generally it just came very intuitively to me. And when I would listen to speeches by people like Tom Reagan, it would strike a chord with me a lot more. And also, I think that at least from my experience when talking to people on the street, for me, it worked a lot better in conversation as well. Maybe that was because it suited my way of thinking, and so it just naturally fitted into the conversations I had. Maybe it's just like that. But it seemed like when I was talking to people on the street who had probably never thought about animal rights before, when I spoke about it in a rights-based way, the message would seem to be conveyed a lot more effectively. Now, that's not me like shitting on any other approach. Maybe people are just a lot more adept at having conversations about it and conveying the message of animal rights in other ways. And I'm just sort of, I don't know if impaired is the right word, but maybe I'm more impaired in those ways. But yeah, I would say the rights-based approach sits with me a lot more. And then you asked about which approach to take in terms of, did you mean like style of activism, or did you mean sort of like what ethical framework?
I think both, because I'm wondering how you navigate when there's conflicts within the vegan movement when it comes to animal welfare reform, or say animal products in medical industry and stuff like that. These tend to be contentious issues, and say even lab-grown meat. So one, it's like, how does that inform your activism? But then also personally, how does that inform your ethical framework? And then, you know, that kind of goes into the antinatalism thing as well. So
yeah, when it comes to the approach we should take to animal rights activism. The Dunning-Kruger effect, when you go into something with not that much knowledge and you think you know everything, and then the more you learn, you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I have that big time. So when I first started animal rights activism, the sort of the narrative of activism that was put forward to me, and when I use the term narrative, I don't mean that there was anyone scheming away behind the scenes trying to make everyone think this way. It was just generally the way that was accepted to think about it in the community, was very much we need to be out on the streets talking to people as consumers so that we can influence their demands for animal products, and individually as they over time remove animal products from, I mean, usually when we do outreach, it's often geared towards just talking about animals in the food industries, presumably because that is where most of the suffering or the rights violations, or however you want to frame it, goes on. But that was very much the perspective that was put forward to me and I absorbed. We need to target the demand, and as the demand goes down, the supply will follow it. Now, I did activism on a very regular basis using that approach for maybe like 2.5 years. And then I started to talk to people who said that we need to take a more systems-based approach. Now, when they said systems-based approach, they essentially meant we shouldn't focus on individual people and their behaviors, but we should try and focus on structural changes. And then the individual people will just sort of like, the changes in the structure will filter down to the individual people. So for example, one very simple example that's always given with a systems-based approach is if we can influence the government to change subsidies to move them away from animal agriculture and towards plant-based products, it will make animal products more expensive, plant products less expensive, and presumably then, without having to actually go out and change any of the consumers directly, they will just generally tend, because people want to save money and stuff, they will tend towards the plant-based products then, and more plant-based products will sell and less animal products will sell, and you can do it that way. Now, I met a lot of people who put that perspective forward, and that did actually make a lot of sense to me at the time, and it still does. But then I got to the point where, so I then engaged. So when I heard that perspective, I was still doing like street outreach and stuff like that. And the more I was doing street outreach, the more I was thinking like, what am I doing here? I'm just speaking to random people on the street, and I don't feel like I'm having any impact. Like, I think it's something ridiculous. Like I may be talking complete shit here, but I think it's something ridiculous that like 120,000 people are born a day or something like that. Maybe you two know the statistics better than me, but it's a ridiculous amount of people born every day. And if we want to change people individually, we're going to have to meet that every day just to break even. And I was like standing in Camden doing a Cube of Truth, and I was just thinking like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm not changing. If I go to 5 cubes a week and I'm realistic about it, maybe I'll influence one person a week to completely change their diet, change how they think about things, sort of come over to the side of animal rights. Because to be like, maybe you heard recently, I think it was recent anyway, like Anonymous for the Voiceless, who is probably the most well-known group that does street outreach for animal rights. They scrapped their tally system, which they had for quite a while, which is basically at the end of a demonstration, you just sort of give a tally of how many people you think have gone away and seriously considered animal rights. And when I first started, I thought like, that sounds like a good system, but it's just prone, and they recognize this, which is why they took it away. It's just prone to so many biases and things like this. people inflate how much they think they've influenced people, etc., etc. Like, and I just began to think, I was just like, I'd talk to maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 people in an evening, and I'd be like, none of them have gone away and thought about animal rights, really. Maybe some of them have said, yeah, I'll look into this to make me feel better so that they can get out of talking to me. But I don't think any of them actually went away and really did anything. And basically, so I just began to question, like, how effective actually is that? Personally, I don't feel like I'm really doing anything, and I'm putting so much time into it. So I then began to look into the systems-based approach that people had put forward. I joined a group called Animal Rebellion, who I volunteered with full-time for a while. I essentially had this, I think I basically just got burnout. I had the same thing. I was putting all this effort into trying to change government and sort of higher level structures and stuff like this. And I just wasn't seeing any returns to the labor that was putting in. And I think I just got a bit burnt out. And then I got to the point where I was just like, I genuinely don't know what the best thing to be doing is. And so I haven't really been doing any animal rights activism recently. And it's not because I don't want to and I'm any less passionate. I still believe in it just as strongly. I just genuinely don't know what road to take forward. Like, I've tried, like, I've dipped my toe and spent significant time as well doing many different types of activism. And I just don't know which one is the right way to go forward. And I'm still trying to figure it out, because I don't want to just throw myself into something and just get demoralized by it when it doesn't actually have any impact.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm rambling, but
Oh no, go ahead.
More recently, my mind has been swayed more towards, I think the way forward is investing in things like lab-based meats or lab-grown meats and stuff like this, because as soon as we can get something like that to match the cost or become cheaper than like the flesh of animals, like that would spread so quickly. I think a lot of people are like, oh, but maybe people won't like it being grown in a lab. I don't buy that. I think as soon as it becomes cheaper, all people really care about is how much does it cost. Because it's the same, like, people always say that they care about animal welfare, but they still buy like the cheapest animal products in the supermarket because they say they care about these things, but when it comes to it, it's just price that will drive someone, really, a lot of the time. So I don't know, at the moment, I feel like that's something that we should focus on more, is trying to get lab-grown meat and other products like that to hit the market as quickly as possible. And I know maybe it's not something that people will find satisfying. Like, I know everyone, and I included, wants the whole world to have this, you know, ethical awakening or whatever, but it's not going to happen. People don't care about animals, and they're going to keep having kids as well. It's just a sad fact of reality. And so I think we've just got to take a pragmatic approach and try and just change the supply that people are going to be eating, because I don't think we're really going to change the demand that much. So I don't know if that's depressing or not.
No. I mean, I think I agree. Honestly, I think the impact of lab grown meats is going to be very, very important. And yeah, I mean, appealing to people's wallet, you know, I think is probably the right way to go. And I also have a lot of misgivings about a lot of styles of activism. I mean, the whole bothering people on the street thing just doesn't seem like a great approach to me. I mean, I know I don't think it works. I don't think it works either. I appreciate it when people do it. You know, the very few people that do it with antinatalism. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I love seeing it, you know, especially because that position is such a minority position. And it takes such cojones to go out in the street and talk to people about it. But I don't necessarily think it's the way forward. But I think maybe this is a good time for this question. Is that, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just before we move on from the topic, So I was saying that I think we should focus on things like lab-grown meat. Another thing I think we should focus on, and this is where I haven't fully moved away from the whole we should change individuals thing, is I think we should pick very specific people and try to influence them. So when I say that, I mean try and influence people that set the basis for conversations, that influence culture. And I'm talking about like public intellectuals, people like well, I mean, I was going to say someone like Joe Rogan because he has such a big podcast, but like he's famously like really closed-minded on this issue. But maybe someone like Sam Harris, who has said some really stupid stuff on animal rights. But if we could influence someone like him, and like all you need to do is with a public intellectual that people really respect, just get them in a room or get them on a podcast or something like that, and just go for them on this topic. Because I don't think you really, with someone like Sam Harris, just as an example, but there can be loads of other people, with someone like Sam Harris, like he's an intellectually intelligent person. You don't really have to care about making him feel bad or anything like that, because I don't think he will. He understands that when you're criticizing him, you're not criticizing him, you're criticizing his ideas and his arguments. So I think with someone like that, you can really go for it. And if you show everyone and really hammer them on this point that they're just chatting shit, then it's going to influence loads of people, or at least hopefully it will. Maybe I'll be proven wrong on that point. But I think when it comes to changing individual people, we really need to focus our efforts on these sort of like public intellectuals that are going to have a big impact. Because at the moment, if we're just a couple of dickheads on the street with some signs, like, yes, we know we're putting the right message forward, but most people are just going to like disregard us as like whack jobs. But if you get someone like Sam Harris on your side, like, yeah, we shouldn't have to go to those lengths to make people appreciate the message. But if you have someone with those credentials on your side, it's going to make such an impact. Like, take someone like Cosmic Skeptic recently. Like, he recently woke up to animal rights and what's going on. And personally, I think it's brought the movement some more credibility to the people that he appeals to. So a lot of atheists, etc., etc. Now, maybe some people think like, oh, he's just gone a bit crazy and now he sort of like has fallen in love with animals or whatever. But I think it has more of an impact changing those people than it does changing Joe Blogs on the street.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I mean, Dawkins is another one people bring up all the time. If we could just get Dawkins,
he needs to get pummeled on this.
I mean, he has no excuse. You know what I mean? Really, no excuse at this point.
He's even publicly said that he realizes he's in the wrong. He's just not changing.
Right. But if you could, if you could get a mind like that to change, I agree with you completely. I think the impact that kind of shift in one person could, what that would do for a lot of people would be huge. I agree with that completely.
Yeah. I think at least where my thinking is at the moment, the two main things we need to do are focus on technological innovation that is essentially going to innovate animal use out of it. Like, it just will make it, well, it's unnecessary already. Like, we don't need to eat animals, but in the eye of the average person, it will innovate it into being completely unnecessary. And just like, we can just like, it will just innovate it out of existence, basically. And then also we need to focus on influencing sort of thinkers and public intellectuals and stuff.
As you well know, there's quite a lot of crossover between antinatalism and animal rights, at least in some antinatalism, that's true. But as communities, we're only really just starting to see real crossover, I think. I mean, that's one of the reasons I find, your story of hearing that word for the first time so interesting, because obviously, like, at least in the UK, it has been a bit of a bugbear of, like, it does come up in the vegan activism, but it's not really being dealt with. And so it's like really just in the last few years, I feel like the communities are starting to talk to each other a little bit. And I think there are obviously there's so much important work between those communities to do. And I think there's sort of a missing piece of one another. So coming from a place where, you know both communities pretty intimately at this point, what do you think needs to happen to sort of merge those conversations more?
I think I was talking when Lath and I wrote the handbook, and we wanted to get it looked over by someone. The guy that runs, I don't know if anyone knows it, Carnism Debunked. It's like a website, and there's like some other social media pages and stuff, but it's a website that basically takes a lot of the arguments against animal rights and essentially debunks them. And we thought, well, he's done that for animal rights, so let's get him to look over what essentially is the same thing but for antinatalism. And when he was looking over them, he's already antinatalist, but when he was looking over them, he was just like, I've not seen the common excuses for procreation laid out in this way before. And looking at them now, I realize how similar they are to the excuses for animal exploitation.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is probably the way that is going to bring people together the most, is getting the two groups to... And before I say this, I think there is some wisdom in keeping them slightly separately, because I think they are distinct movements. But as you say, there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of the same people will have their foot in both camps. But I think the way to bring people together, and maybe to get more people to straddle both camps, is to focus on the fact that the same flawed arguments are used for both. Things like, I have canines, I have a dick. My ancestors did it. It's natural. All of this sort of stuff. What if we did it nicely? That sort of stuff, So, yeah, maybe that's not sort of like a revelatory answer, but I think that...
No.
I think focusing on that will be a good way forward, because a lot of people in the animal rights community love to watch these videos of, meat eater gets obliterated by earthling head or something like that.
Yeah.
But if they realize that, they're using the same logic on this topic, then maybe it'll get them to think about it.
Oh, so we can get them to think about it if we can tell them about all of the future pwn videos.
Exactly.
That they could get out of it. Well, that's a great point. There might be some truth to that, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah. There would be good if there was some of that at least. So some would agree that anti-procreation is split up into 4 general schools of thought: child-free, vehement, antinatalism proper, and Ethelism. Do you have any thoughts on each?
Well, yeah, so I guess like vehement, I'm not one. I don't see how, if I'm understanding the position correctly, I don't see how anyone can... maybe this is going to come across really snobby, but I don't understand how anyone can take ethics seriously and come to that conclusion. With child-free, it's not really anything I have a position on, because child-free is just someone like choosing not to have a child. Philosophy may not even come into it. It may just be a financial decision. So I don't really have a position on that. If someone is child-free, then great, I guess. I would prefer if the ethics were there, obviously, but if the family line is ending with them anyway, then that's good. Then antinatalism. Did you say antinatalism and Ethelism?
Yes.
Or did you use different terms? Yeah. So with antinatalism as an anthropocentric thing, again, I think when it comes to humans, it's got strong arguments, which is why I am one. But I don't see why it stops at humans. It seems like if humans just went extinct, we would be leaving behind these experiencing beings that are just going to rip each other apart over and over again. Probably not for eternity, because at one point, heat death, etc., etc. But for a long time, there's going to be a lot of fucked up stuff that goes on, and there's not really going to be anyone around, as far as we're aware, that has the moral agency and cognitive abilities to do anything about it. Now, I'm not trying to be some sort of human supremacist or anything like that, but I think it's fairly obvious that humans are the only species that have the capacity to be able to handle these ethical questions and actually do something about it seriously. And so I think, we need to look to wild animals, realize that they are in a really shit situation, and we need to do something about it. Now, the best way to go about that is a whole nother question. I don't think humans are in the right position now to do it. We're severely uneducated on the subject. We don't know enough, and we probably, definitely don't have the technologies to be able to do it as well. But that is definitely an ethical question that needs to be considered. And so moving on to Ethelism, I mean, that is the philosophy that I align with the most, which, for the reasons I've just stated. But that's basically my view on the four things. I just think it would be very, very sad if humans, particularly intentionally, went extinct to leave behind everyone else. Like, the way I think about it is, swap out all of the wild animals for humans that have essentially the same behaviors, cognitive abilities as the non-human animals that are in nature. Because sometimes I think that people don't have that, they don't fully appreciate the situation non-human animals are in, because we still have this view of non-human animals sort of being not really our responsibility, especially if they are in, they're not domesticated. Whereas with humans, even if we're not related to them or anything like that, or they're not in our family, we still see them as they're human. We need to help them out. And we need to have the same view with non-human animals. You swap out all the non-human animals, replace them with humans, and it's just a bunch of humans that are extremely mentally impaired, going around eating each other and dying of exposure or parasites and stuff like this. Obviously, we would help them out. You wouldn't just, if you had a load of people that couldn't help themselves and were in pain a lot of the time and hurting each other, and you just left the room, I would say that's highly ethically questionable. So, yeah, I think we need to consider that.
Yeah, I think
we are at the moment.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that was beautifully said. Thank you for that.
Mm.
So you went vegan, and there was this 3-year period of time from sort of when you went vegan and heard about antinatalism to when ANI started, essentially, right? It was about a 3-year course of time. So what were you doing within those 3 years? Were you interacting with the community at all? Were you researching the subject, or were you just sort of, quietly an antinatalist on the inside, but weren't necessarily doing anything outwardly with the idea?
Well, for the first probably year, nothing really. I was one, but I didn't really know there was a community out there, because the only exposure I'd had to it was really listening to podcasts with Benatar on and stuff like that. And it's not like Benatar at the end of a podcast says, join my Discord or something like that and meet the community. He just sort of signs off, because he's a fairly reserved person. So I didn't really know there was a community out there. And so really, when it comes to anything like that, I was just focusing on animal rights really for the first year. The first time that I had a, I don't know if you'd call it a debate or whatever, but the first time I actually engaged with someone on the topic of procreation was actually my ex-girlfriend. And she, I don't think she'll ever see this, but well, maybe she will, I don't know, but hello. But basically, she may not remember this because it may not have been significant to her, but basically there was this one time where I don't know why I was thinking about the subject. Maybe I'd I'd been like, oh, maybe I should go back and listen to another podcast or something like that. But the topic was in my head, and I remember we were like lying in bed and I was trying to get to sleep, and then I think she said something, and I was kind of like, I think she was talking about like someone was pregnant or something like that, and it just sort of like rubbed me up the wrong way. And so I just started putting these sort of like arguments to her, and I didn't do it very well because this was the first time I'd really engaged with someone. So like, I don't think she destroyed me, but I didn't destroy her either. And she sort of like disarmed me because she was asking questions that it was like, I knew that there were good answers to them, but I didn't know how to, you know, when you have it in your mind, but you can't really articulate it. Which is what someone says when they actually don't know what they're talking about. But basically, in my head, I knew what I was talking about, but I just couldn't articulate it. And anyway, eventually we sort of just like stopped talking about it and went to sleep. And basically for about 2 years, that was the only real time it had come up. Now, over those 2 years, like whenever people talked about procreation or whatever, or someone said like, oh, my sister's having a baby or something like that, inside I would always be like, oh, something like that sort of reaction. But I never brought it up or anything. The time when I started talking about it or interacting with it more and more was really only like a year ago. And that was actually because when I joined Animal Rebellion, as I talked about before, there was a guy who, at the start of it, I didn't really know that well, but I got to know more and more over the course of volunteering with them. And I really liked him. I think he's a really nice guy, and he's anti-natalist. Now, I don't think he does any anti-natalist activism. I don't think he's engaged with the community at all. But he doesn't take bullshit. He will call people out when they talk shit about procreation and stuff like this. And I really appreciated that. And so I talked to him more about it. And I think he sort of said like, oh yeah, you know, such and such, they're anti-natalist, and them, etc. And so I began to talk to more people about it, but I didn't get fully involved in the community or anything. And then I can't remember how, but during lockdown, I came across one of Mark's Hangouts, and
Woo.
yeah, exactly. So you have Mark to thank for Annie.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the podcast, incidentally. So yeah, you've kind of set these projects up.
Thank you. Sweet validation.
Yes. Well, so this is what I find so interesting. So you have these 3 years of not really engaging with it. But I think this is a good time to start talking a little bit about Antinatalism International, because, you know, I think the other founders would agree. In a lot of ways, you are sort of the heart and soul of ANI, because you brought it's true. I mean, you just brought such unbelievable passion and energy to it. You know, you really saw the fact that it's so under-organized. And you know, all of the skills with organization that you have. I mean, you're a great project manager, and you kind of put this thing together in a way that it's never really been put together before. And so that I just think that's such an amazing sort of transition, you know, from not being involved with it at all to sort of making it, you know, in a way that's it's never been formulated, you know, in the past. So what was that thing? I mean, other than you know, Mark having a hangout, I mean, and you sort of get going from there. I mean, what made you decide that you wanted to take such initiative in organizing the disorganized world of antinatalism?
Well, I mean, we were in the middle of lockdown at the time, so it wasn't like I had much else to do.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I'm joking, but I don't know. I think I'd just come out of and now this is me just speculating for the first time. I don't actually know why my mind was in that place, but I'd just come out of volunteering full time with an organization, and so I was just very and within that organization, which was Animal Rebellion, I actually think I was very good at it. But the thing that I was responsible for was organizing groups of people. I was involved in setting local groups up and stuff like that. Now, maybe people from Animal Rebellion will see this. I agree. I don't think I was very good at it. But because I was so used to doing that, I think maybe I was just in the mindset for like, I want to organize something. I wasn't really sure what. But yeah, I turned up to one of Mark's hangouts, met a couple of people, and I thought, these people are cool, so I'll come to a couple more. And then I think it was maybe like the third or fourth one that I attended, and then the conversation came up of like, is anyone organizing in any way? Is there any sort of like coherent direction towards which the community is going? And there was a lot of like, no, there isn't, but it would be kind of cool if there was, but no one was really sorting it out. And so I think I messaged Mark afterwards saying, like, do you think anyone would be interested in actually setting something up? And then Mark reached out to you, Tejas and Pratima and Dana, and then Laith got involved because you brought him in, and no, Pratima wasn't I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember who was involved when, but eventually we all came together, and then we just started kicking things off. And at the start, I did not mean for it to be. I did not mean to be like the project manager or anything like that, as you described me. But I remember very early on, I think it was in the second meeting, and for anyone, well, it'll be most of the people listening won't come to our regular meetings because they won't be founders. But in our regular meetings, it often happens when you say like, who wants to do this? And there's just deathly silence. And then it's like, oh, okay, I'll do that then. With like no hate for anyone, obviously, it's just like kind of funny. Like, but yeah, I remember in like our second meeting, I said, I don't want to feel like I'm like controlling anything. So should we take turns in guiding the meetings and stuff? And it was just like utter silence. And I was like, okay, I'll like sort of like oversee the meetings and stuff. And yeah, I guess it's just sort of went from there.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, people have tried in the past, myself included, to organize this movement. And, part of it's I just didn't have the skills to do it myself. So, I mean, I think, it's come together this year in ways that, I just didn't think were possible before this year. And I think much of that is owed to your efforts. So I think, it's pretty amazing. Sorry, Mark, did you want to say something?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I'm finding this boring as fuck.
I'm going down like memory lane of a lot's happened this year. Like
it really has. Yeah.
I remember in December, with help from Kirby running this fundraiser to do meetups, and we did have a couple of meetups in person, but then the pandemic happened, and then we. I remember organizing, like making a call out to get everyone to start an Antinatalism podcast. And then I remember there was talk about an Antinatalism conference. And then I was like, maybe later down the road, we could do like an educational charity. And then I remember you coming to the meetup and talking about, hey, we should have a central hub for like resources and websites that people can go to, and then an organization. And I'm like, hey, I know people. And then we started talking, and then I'm like, you should talk to Amanda and Tejas, because India's amazing of what they're doing with Child Free India. And then it's just we've been on lockdown, but my gosh, this year I feel like I've been doing.
We've been pumping out the material. Yeah, no, there's no joke. It's for real.
Yeah, it's been in like overdrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've still got like a motherfucker worth of stuff still to do.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable. I mean, just the next few days, actually.
Yeah, we keep on like working on projects, and we're halfway through it, and we think, oh fuck, that would be so good to do as well, and then we start another one.
I know. We got to stop that. No more new ideas for a little while. Well, perhaps though it is a position that you didn't initially wish to find yourself as a sort of project manager, and again, I think you are excellent at that kind of work, of organizing people and kind of getting people to be on the right track to produce and move forward. Antinatalism International does have a lot of moving parts. I mean, it's been sort of challenging, sort of getting it all together. So what for you has been the most challenging thing in ANI that you've encountered so far? And by that same token, what's been the most rewarding? This might be a dangerous question to ask, but yeah.
The hardest thing has been time zones and trying to figure them out. so many times someone has said like, oh yeah, I'm ready for the meeting, and someone else has been like, it's tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah. So many times, like Tage is like, oh, I'll see you tonight, but my tonight is your tomorrow. And like, oh, I often refer to time zones as Anti-Natalism International kryptonite.
Yeah. And we were just getting to know them, and then the fucking clocks went back, and it screws everything up. But wait, so the question was, what was the hardest thing, and what was the most difficult?
What's been the most difficult thing, challenging thing? What's been the most rewarding so far?
I think the most difficult thing has probably been, because at the start we all came together with different ideas of what we wanted to see happen. So I think the most difficult thing, well, apart from coming up with the logo, was deciding which initiatives we really wanted to put our effort into. But I really enjoyed that process because we've come up with initiatives, or other founders came up with initiatives that I would literally have never thought of, like Adopt an Activist. Pratima just came up with out of nowhere, and I think that's like a revelatory idea. Like, it is going to be difficult, and it's going to take a while to get in place. But I think that's I think that can do a lot of good. And then the most fun thing, or the best thing, I think getting to know people has been the most fun thing. Because I mean, I know I've never met any of you, but I feel like everyone at the meeting has a very distinct personality. Like, there's no one in the meeting where it's like, yeah, I'll never think about them again. Like, they're boring. Like, we all have, I think, very distinct personalities. And it also helps that we all have similar senses of humor as well. So I think like we bounce off each other quite nicely. And also one thing that I've really appreciated is I think we're all very mature in the fact that we can have difficult conversations. So if someone comes up with an idea that they're really passionate about, but the others think like maybe it's not going to go so well, like, we've never had any issues talking about those things. And I think we've had some pretty difficult discussions. I'm not sure any of them have got heated ever, but I think maybe that's a testament to our maturity. I think that I've enjoyed like just interacting with you guys most, I think.
Yeah, I'll maybe cut this part out, but for my part, I feel exactly the same way. I think, this whole thing would have fallen apart already if all of us didn't get along so well. And I think even when things I don't think we've ever gotten heated, but even when things get to be a bit more on the controversial side or everything, like, we just sort of have this ability to talk it out, which is great.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty unique.
I think it does help that the fact that we're in different countries, we can't punch each other, but
that could be it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've just enjoyed interacting with all of you guys and getting to know you.
Same here. It's been a very creative process, and I've really enjoyed it.
So let me say, I did show up to a couple of the meetings, and one thing I want to compliment you guys on is I really appreciate the dynamic you all have with one another, and I've seen like how it works a little bit in the background, and it's quite impressive, and I have high hopes for ANI. I'm curious, since the release of ANI and the launch, what do you think about the response to ANI so far?
I think generally it's been good. There's been a few odd comments here and there, but I generally, it's been really positive. A lot of people, when we've so far we've just really been doing like community sort of stuff, like having hangouts and the quiz and stuff like that. But everyone's been really appreciative. A lot of people have expressed their want to volunteer and get involved, which has been really nice. Some people are already involved, most of it with sort of translations and stuff. But yeah, I can't really complain. I mean, when you do anything, there's always going to be some people that criticize you, and some of those criticisms will be perfectly valid and you do need to change. And some of them will just be maybe people that are just jealous that you've done something, or, maybe they just don't have anything else to do. Which, I mean, I don't want to name names, but I think some of those criticisms were from people like that. But it's been super positive mostly. Yeah. I've really liked like meeting a lot of, I'm like become best friends with anyone. Like I haven't been able to meet them that much, but like everyone I've been able to speak to, has been like really good to interact with them.
I'm glad to hear that it's been mostly positive, and that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting as well. The people that have expressed concerns, would you be able to voice what those were that you think are valid, or that you'd like to address or comment on?
Yeah, well, some of them, a lot of them aren't like general criticisms. A lot of them are like very specific things. So for example, a couple of people messaged saying that the reference guides we had on the website, some of them link to videos or articles or whatever that espouse views that contradict the values that we have listed on our website. We always intended the reference guides just to be a place where people can go and find information to explore, the community and the world of antinatalism for themselves. It isn't a list of like our 10 commandments of like everything we agree with. And I guess maybe we took for granted that people would assume that, or like maybe we naively thought people would, be on the same page as us. But a few people reached out and said, hey, there are these things that you're linking to that contradict your values. So like for that reason, we put a disclaimer up just saying, we don't necessarily endorse these views. We're just putting them here as a service to everyone, so that there's sort of a centralized place where you can get a lot of content. And, if someone says something you disagree with, then battle it out with them intellectually. Obviously, don't, have a duel with them or whatever. But, yeah, that those views are in the marketplace of ideas, and you can handle them whichever way you like. We're just putting it there not as an endorsement, but just to make it available for people. So that's one example. I'm trying to think of a couple of others. A couple of others have just been like critiques of how we've like framed things or whatever. So we have on the website like what is antinatalism, and in it we break down like 4 key schools of thought that we thought was a good sort of like, it's not supposed to be the most accurate thing in the world. It's just sort of like a shotgun explanation for anyone that just generally wants to understand the different schools of thought. We had some people criticize that and stuff like that. There's been some people that have sort of critiqued points put forward in the handbook, stuff like that. But it's not like anyone's come out and, dropped a bomb or anything.
Excellent. What initiatives with ANI are you most excited about for the coming year? We certainly have a lot planned. So what are you most excited to dive into?
Well, if it comes off well and we do it well, I would say Adopt an Activist and the Academy as well. I kind of want to say all of the initiatives, but given that would, like, I can't really do that, I would say those 2 things are the most I look forward to. And the reason I say that is because those 2 things, I feel, maybe they don't explicitly so, but I think that they will help equip people a lot more to go out and talk to other people about the philosophy. Whereas things like, I don't know, the dating campaign or the film festival, whilst they can do the same thing, I think they're much more, well, less the dating, more the film festival is much more sort of like a cultural event, I think, or an art event, or however you want to put it, rather than an outreach event. But I do recognize the fact that the film festival can very much be used as an outreach event. But yeah, I would say the Academy and the Adopt an Activist, but that's like if we pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to say the same, and I think we can. I think we can pull them off, but they're definitely really difficult projects. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to attack those in more detail in the coming months. What do you most hope to achieve through Antinatalism International, Lawrence?
I think I mentioned it in my blog post, but one thing that I do want to achieve, which is kind of like I don't know if this is like a niche thing or it's very specific to me, but I want to get the UK as a country to a place where no philosophy student or someone who's a member of a philosophy society can finish their degree without coming into contact with this philosophy. Now, I didn't do a philosophy degree and I wasn't part of the philosophy society, but I would not be surprised if the vast majority of students in a philosophy degree or philosophy society don't even know the term. Maybe I'm wrong, but my ex-girlfriend did English and philosophy, so I heard about the philosophy side that she was learning, and it never came up. And I knew a few people who did philosophy, and I don't think they knew what it was. So I would say maybe that is sort of like, I mean, I don't know how we're going to achieve it, but yeah, I would like to see that, because I think if you're going to target anyone with this message, you want to target young people, because they're the ones that haven't had the kids yet.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, I'd love to see
Yeah.
that happen. I don't exactly know how to achieve that either. But you know, it should be, I think we got to get it to a point where the younger people are bringing it to their philosophy professors too, you know, that they want to have this conversation. And I do think that that's possible. You know, I think things like the film festival, not that that would necessarily have that influence, but I mean, those cultural things could have the potential to have that kind of influence too, where it just gets the word into people's heads, and then maybe it can kind of trickle up, you know, towards academia and that kind of way too.
Well,
so,
I think if you get it into the culture, just the term, if you make people aware of the term, then it's harder to disregard as some fringe thing. Like, it could still be a very fringe thing. Like, at the moment, it's a very fringe thing, but in the future, it could remain a very fringe thing. But if people know the term and they understand it's a thing, then they may be less inclined to just disregard it as a couple of crazies that, you know, had a bad upbringing as a child or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What are some of the best ways that people can help ANI, Lawrence?
Well, at the moment it's translating, but I would say when we finally set up the bank account and the ability for people to donate, I would say for donations. And just while I say that, let me just lay out a few things that the donations could go towards, just so people don't think they're just donating into some ether and whatever, and like someone's going to run away to Marbella or whatever. Like, some things that could really help straight away is stuff like video editing software, like good quality video editing software, so that we can improve the YouTube channel. Stuff like there's social media, there's these platforms where you can organize your social media posts, so it auto posts to different social media things, stuff like that, so we can make our social media more like professional, not like corporate, but it's just more streamlined so that it's more appealing to a general populace. Because if it's like, I don't know about the Facebook and the Twitter, but the Instagram at the moment is not like the most visually appealing thing. So if we were able to put things in place where we can sort of streamline it a bit more, I think that once we do begin to reach out more to people outside the community, they may find the sort of stuff more palatable if it's in a sort of visual format that they're used to. So those are some examples. And another example is just like future projects. So we want to put together something like, you know, the vasectomy fund. When we're putting together the academy, that's going to need stuff like we will need to buy resources so that we can, you know, host forms of learning that may require certain software, etc., stuff like that. So donating in the future once that's up and running, that will be a good way as well. But once the initiatives, the thing is that at the moment, because we're still forming the initiatives and laying the foundations, it's hard to get people involved. But once the initiatives are up and running, we can slot people into them, and people can like really help. You know, it's not just about helping us out, it's just us all facilitating together to help the community as a whole and push things forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's been one of the benefits of doing sort of these more just like funner, these more like just like, you know, fun community projects, because we're getting to know the layout of like who's going to want to do what, and just getting to know people. So I think we're going to be in a good position to do that once the initiatives, you know, do become a little bit more solidified and we can actually start rolling them out. So yeah, I agree. So let's talk a little bit about the book. So you sort of miraculously wrote a book along with one of the other ANI founders, Laith Malik Reem. Hi, Laith. It's called An Antinatalist Handbook, Responses to Common Natalist Excuses, and it's fantastic. Everybody should go check it out. What can you tell me about this project? How did this happen?
Yeah, I can't remember who initially came up with the idea, whether it was me or Laith. So if Laith remembers, then Laith will have to say. But basically, the basic concept came from Earthling Ed put an ebook together, which I forget the name of it, but basically he did the exact same thing, and he ran a YouTube series as well called 30 Days, 30 Excuses, and he basically just took 30 of some of the most common excuses that people put forward for exploiting animals, and sort of went through each one and sort of provided, you know, a rebuttal that a sort of lay person, as it were, can, you know, present, and someone just on the street can understand. Like, it doesn't go into hardcore philosophy or anything like that. It's like if the average person read it, they would be able to understand the points in it and stuff like that. Yeah, either Laith or I came up with the idea of doing it for procreative ethics, and then we just started writing it. We tried to think of as many of the most common excuses we could. We asked other people, like the other founders. We asked whoever we knew that can think of them, and we put them all down, and then we just started writing. And the first edition is done in English. Laith is currently translating it into Arabic. There are a few other people translating it into other languages as well, which is really good. We're, as Earthling Ed did, we're putting it into a video format as well, which will go up on the Annie YouTube. Well, some of it's already up. So the first English one is up, and maybe the first Arabic as well. Well, I mean, by the time this goes out, a lot of them will be up.
A lot of them will be up, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so that's where we're at the moment, is putting the video versions up. I, at the time of recording this, have recorded maybe 20 of them in video, so I've still got to record 10 more. But yeah, that's basically where we are at the moment.
It's a fantastic project. I've heard you say that there are other, you know, editions or volumes sort of on the way. So what do you think those volumes will look like? What do you think they will cover specifically? Do you envision sort of a theme for each of the newer ones that may come out eventually?
Yeah, so Laith and I were talking about this, and we think we might do a combination of different things. We haven't really decided yet. So we're definitely going to do other editions, obviously, because, you know, there's endless excuses people give. But we're currently working on the second edition already. And basically the initial thought was what we'll do is we'll just release more editions that have more excuses in them. So it will go from 30 to maybe 45 and then to 60 and then et cetera, et cetera. We've also had the idea of releasing specific editions that center around certain topics. So we were thinking of doing a religious one. So just dealing with religious excuses and maybe get 30 of those and put them into sort of religious version of the booklet. Another idea is that we will just release future editions, and in the future, some of the future editions may be categorized. So we won't have a specific religious booklet, but we'll have one big booklet that we'll keep on expanding, and we'll add chapters basically. So first we go through sort of naturalistic ones, then we go through sort of technological excuses, then we go through, I don't know, appeals to consequence, like, you know, if we stop procreating, then extinction, and then religious ones as well. So there's a couple different ways we can take it, and we haven't really fully decided where we're going to take it yet, but we are working on the second edition. So another edition will be coming out in due course.
That's amazing. And I love that it's a video series. I think it'd probably be okay for me to say that, you know, if you are listening to this interview and you are interested in maybe translating the book into other languages, and even making, you know, videos in other languages, reading out the different excuses, they should contact you. Where can they contact you if they're interested in doing that?
Yeah. So you can either contact Laith or me. So our emails are our names and then at Antinatalism International.com. So mine is Lawrence, obviously, with the W. I'm sure my name will be in the description somewhere of the video, so you can just copy and paste it. And then Laith is Laith, and then at Antinatalisminternational.com. You can contact us there or join the Annie Discord, and we're both in there. But yeah, if you want to translate the booklet, so the first edition is already being translated into French, Spanish, Arabic, Czech, and Hebrew, I think. I might be forgetting some other languages, but I think it's those 5 languages at the moment. But we'll need proofreaders, and also if people want to record videos, because, I mean, I'm recording the English video series, Laith is recording the Arabic one. But if we have like a French speaker, for example, that is willing to come on camera, they can record the French versions, because, I mean, it is Anti-Natalism International after all. So we want to try and reach as many people in many different languages as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great project, everybody. So yeah, if you'd like to get involved, please do. We'd love to see it. Well, I just want to also say that I love that you're making videos. I love that you're starting your YouTube channel, and, you know, even covering other subjects. You did a video about music recently, which I thought was great. Is there any other subject matter you think you're going to tackle in the future of your YouTube channel?
I'm not really sure. To be honest, I haven't really put much thought to it. I've got like a list of some video ideas that I'll be interested in, but because I've been so busy with Annie stuff, I really haven't put that much thought into like the personal YouTube channel. At some point, I'll put the handbook videos up on my personal one as well later down the line, but I'm not really sure at the moment. So, I mean, everyone keep your expectations low.
You know, honestly, I think that's often the best way to do a YouTube channel, is to not put too much pressure on it, and just sort of like, if it becomes a big thing for you down the line, that's okay. And if not, hey, that's okay too. So I think that's more than fair. Yeah. You know, obviously we're still sort of stuck in this COVID era where we can't do a lot of activism outside of the internet, unfortunately, but that hopefully will change eventually. And so, yeah, I mean, what are just some of the things you want to do in the future? You've talked a little bit about some of those things, but, you know, you've talked a lot about wanting to do public speaking. So, you know, what are your plans?
Yeah. I think one of the big things that we're going to have to do is present ourselves to the rest of the world. So at the moment, antinatalism is a very fringe philosophy and idea. Not many people subscribe to it. So what we really need to do is mainstream the idea. And when I say mainstream the idea, I don't mean get everyone to become antinatalist. I mean, obviously that would be great, but, you know, having that as our goal now, like, we've got so many shorter term goals that we need to achieve before we can do anything like that. Like, that is not going to happen until way down the line, if it ever happens at all. I think what we need to focus on, I'm not trying to be some sort of like dictator in the community. People can do what they want. But in my view, I think the best place that we can focus our efforts at the moment is composing ourselves and preparing ourselves to present ourselves to the rest of the world, basically. We really need to get the idea out there so that people know it's actually a thing, because most people never consider that, don't even know it exists. So we really need to focus on presenting it to people. And one of the ways we can do that, and that I personally want to do, and I am at the moment preparing to do so, is talking to university students. So I've done it before. I've got quite a bit of experience with talking to university students. I mean, very recently I used to be one. So I think that is one way, is if anyone can do public speaking by giving talks at universities or schools, if they'll let you, but schools you might not be able to get in. Whereas with universities, they're a lot more open to, you know, letting fringe ideas in. You know, talking at community events, going to maybe animal rights events, and trying to get a slot for a speech there. So if anyone can do or is open to doing public speaking, like, prepare to do that, so that when COVID finally blows over, you can go to these events and start presenting the idea to people. Another thing is, if you don't want to do public speaking, putting resources together that people can find when they come online, stuff like that. So we're hoping to host a lot of that on the Annie website, stuff like that. I think one of the things we need to focus on at the moment is really just making ourselves presentable for everyone else. And when I say that, I don't mean sanitize yourself so that, you know, you're just this sort of like machine that just regurgitates a message over and over again, but just don't come across crazy, because, you know, it's very easy. Yeah, like, I've done it loads of times. It's very easy to come across as some weirdo. And, you know, everyone likes to imagine that humans, as soon as they hear the right message, they'll just be convinced. That's not how it works. You need to be presentable. You need to put it across in the right way. You need to be affable, all of these sorts of things. So if we really want people to take us seriously, we need to, we need to take seriously the effort of presenting ourselves.
So, Lawrence, thank you so much for doing this interview today. It's been a pleasure. You often jokingly say that you haven't done anything yet with antinatalism, that you're new and you haven't done anything yet. And I sometimes think you still believe that. And I hope moving forward, you know, you begin to recognize all that you have done in such a short amount of time. And just the fact that you know, are an extremely rare individual, Lawrence. I hope that you know that, and I hope that the rest of the antinatalist community starts to recognize, you know, just how lucky we are to have you. The truth is that the vast majority of people that come to this subject who have been in the community a short amount of time or even a long amount of time could never have done what you've done, putting all of this together in such a short amount of time. What you continue to do, what you have done, most just would not do or couldn't do. And even those that have the, you know, the balls to even try, like myself, even, you know, have failed at it. So, yeah, I just want to say that I'm extremely grateful to you for all of the very hard work that you've put into all of this and that you've done. You're a very inspiring human being. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you and the rest of the members of ANI for the last 8 or 9 months or however long it's been. And so, yeah, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you, Lawrence.
No, thank you.
Please subscribe to Lawrence on YouTube and follow him on Instagram. Links below. And of course, also make sure to check out everything that Anti-Natalism International has done so far. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast. This has been Amanda Oldfan Sukenick and Mark J. Maharaj. You can find us on our YouTube channels, Federal Films and Question Mark, respectively. Keep up with my daily antinatalist news updates at Antinatal News on Twitter. Please follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and email us at exploringantinatalism@gmail.com. The podcast can be listened to on the YouTube channel Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, as well as Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Our website, www.exploringantinatalism.com, was designed by the amazing Visions Noirs. Please visit Visions Noirs at www.bionoir.com and find more links to his work below. Logo art by the incredible LifeSucks. Please visit his YouTube channel, and if you would like to perhaps purchase one of the new Exploring Antinatalism t-shirts by LifeSucks, please visit his Etsy page at www.etsy.com/shop/LifeSucksPublishing. And proudly announcing, our new theme music has been graciously provided by I Doubt It. I Doubt It is an alum of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, so please listen to his episode 3, and visit his amazing YouTube channel. All the best, and bye for now.